Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another LinkedIn Live. I'm so excited to be here and focusing on today's topic, which is everybody's favorite and most feared subject at the same time, money, and how to talk about it, how to ask for it, how to get what you want, need, deserve, all that stuff that probably simultaneously creates excitement and terror in the hearts and stomachs of most people. So, as we are launching and as we're getting into our conversation today, I'll introduce you to my wonderful guest in just a moment. But if everybody, as you're joining, whether you're with us on LinkedIn or on YouTube, we've got both streaming, which is super exciting, to just share with us, where are you geographically? What's your industry or your job or your role or your company, if you prefer? And most importantly, why are you here? Because it's not like there aren't 47 other things that either you need to be doing or you'd love to escape to do. So, what has compelled you to honor us with joining the conversation today? What is it that you're looking for? What's your fears about money? What are you hoping to get out of this conversation? We just want to know what's in your head because, frankly, that helps us to steer the conversation because there are only about 8 billion things we could discuss about money, right? So we want to make sure that we're really hitting the nail on the head and getting you what you need and want to make this the most incredibly valuable experience for you. So we've got some people excellent in Philadelphia, New Jersey, East Coast represented, and we'll see wherever else some people are as people are populating and joining from your lunch hour, et cetera. So real quick, let's take a look here. So my guest today, as many of you can see, is Sue Begent. And Sue, I am super excited to have with me today on this conversation because after a very long and successful career in corporate America for the last 5 years, has also been a mindset, confidence, and business coach for entrepreneurs. So she's somebody who really understands both ends of the spectrum, both the notion of salary negotiations and negotiating things with the boss and the internal elements, but also how to do things like ask for the fee that you believe you should be able to charge for your clients, your rates, and that end of the spectrum as well. So we really all have the same fears. They just manifest in slightly different contexts. So with that, Sue Begent, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me as your guest. I'm excited to be here.
So give everybody a quick background. I gave the 1.5 sentence version, but where did you come from professionally and where are you now? And where does money fit into all of this?
Money always fits in whatever we're doing. I actually came to the state, you can probably tell from a few sentences, that I didn't grow up here. So I actually started my career in the pharmaceutical industry in Australia. And I came to the States to work in global marketing on some major global launches here. And I was an executive in pharma for the best part of 25 years.
Because you started when you were 8, right? So
I wish, yes. And, when I left pharma, I realized it was time to do something that I really felt drawn to do. And that had actually informally been part of a lot of what I'd done through a couple of different careers, actually. And so I became a women's business coach. And that's what I've been ever since. And I work more with entrepreneurs, but I absolutely understand the corporate environment and the challenges of going into the boss's office and asking for a raise. And also I understand the challenges of pricing what you do as an entrepreneur and saying your price and feeling worthy of that price. So, yeah.
Yes. And I think that's a really important word that people often try to almost disassociate with money, and that's the word feeling. But unless I'm completely out in left field someplace, my general experience with most of the people that I've coached, and I've coached plenty of clients through in job interviews, which is not just about telling your story, but also the negotiations process, people who are corporate leaders who are looking for the next promotion, negotiating things with the board, negotiating salaries and all those fun things as well. And feeling is at the core because we have all sorts of bugaboos, mental blocks, cultural beliefs, family ingrained beliefs, head trash about what are we about being worthy, And that's the
Yeah.
key word that you used as well. Are we worthy of a certain amount? Who are we to ask for X, Y, and Z? Who are we to think we're, or frankly, I find a lot of people have this feeling where they've been raised in a way, they know they need the money, but there's a sense that
Yeah.
money is dirty, or that having money it's almost bad to have it, but it's also bad not to have it, because there's a fear of rejection either way. There's a stigma against both. I mean, are you hearing similar trends like I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think there's something interesting that we didn't mention, but I think I'm going to mention here. We all have what's called a money set point.
A money set point. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And that's the amount of money that we feel, we can be you get the occasional person who's just about paying their rent. And once they pay their rent, they're fine and they're relaxed. And then when they can't pay their rent, they start pedaling hard to earn more money. Most of us aren't there,
right.
But it's the same dynamic whether you're a multimillionaire or whether you are somebody, a corporate person with a successful career. We all have this sort of bandwidth within which we are comfortable. Once we get above that amount, we relax. We feel that everything is fine. We don't need to worry about it. And when we're below that, we really are striving hard. So yes, huge amount of this is subconscious, huge amount of it, family of origin, absolutely. Money doesn't grow on trees. Who do you think we're made of? What do you think we're made of? Do you think we're the Rockefellers? All those types of things that are meant well and feel very real.
Let me ask everybody in the chat, while you're on that point, I would love to know what kind of family values everyone here was raised with around the idea of money. What either explicitly did your parents say to you about money, earning it, spending it, having it, not having it? Was it competitive? Was it driving force? Was there anything shame or competitive about it? And was it more of a implicit feeling, or did they specifically say to you X, Y, Z? I would love to know what kind of range of experiences our audience has. And I know it takes about 30 seconds or so for the chat to populate, but let's see where our group is coming from here. Continue, Sue. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about this. I think it's so interesting, though, because, if you associate money with conflict, for instance, my parents pretty much didn't argue except for about money. They had different money personalities. My father would spend money. My mother needed to feel as though she had control over money. And so it was a source of a lot of tension, as it is in many relationships. It's always difficult to navigate. We have very different relationships with money. I used to have a pattern where I was actually very good at bringing it in, but I wasn't great at actually keeping it. And so there are all sorts of facets of this relationship, and it is a relationship, and we don't think of it that way. So we don't tend to think of it in terms of, actually, we have to treat it with respect, with care, with attention, with focus. Have to ask ourselves, what nurtures this relationship? We aren't brought up usually with those types of thoughts, and so we often don't have that type of relationship, when often not shown. Well, what does being savvy about it? I think one of the other things that's challenging, and apologies, gents, I work more with women, so I certainly I just understand, my.
And of course, in pharma, you were working with both all the time, and depending on the area, it can be more men at that point. But,
absolutely.
go on.
But I think what's interesting is that we often don't feel well informed. We feel inadequate. We feel challenged by going to see a professional, which is a very important thing to do. Please do that. Go and see all of the appropriate financial professionals in this area. And the problem with that is we don't ask the questions that we need to ask. And so it becomes self-perpetuating. We're not asking the questions. We still feel ignorant. We still feel, depending on our patterns, we can feel guilty. We can feel all sorts of very difficult emotions. So yes, it's it's a very difficult topic, and it's actually one of the reasons I'm focusing on this right now. I think that a lot of us are very worried about money, and also I think that many of us feel as though there is a finite amount sometimes I come across people who feel as though, well, if I earned all of that money, that would mean that other people, it wouldn't be available for other people, which is actually, it's actually the opposite way around. We have more choice about what we do, who we can help, what causes we can support, what role can we play in being a positive force when we are bringing in more money.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because for many who don't know, and I realize I'm so bad at this one pattern that I've done so many of these LinkedIn lives. And you know what I forget to do every time is introduce myself. I introduce my guest, I give the whole intro to the topic. And for those who don't know me, hi, everybody. I'm Laura Sokola. My company is Vocal Impact Productions. I'm a leadership communication and influence coach. So with that, what some people, but many do know and others may not, is that I come from a world of teachers. My world is education. My father was a teacher. His brothers were teachers. A lot of people on my mother's side were teachers. And I swore I would never be a teacher because I was so sick of hearing about school all the time, even on holidays. And so, of course, after college, I became a teacher, and in spite of myself. And, after working in public ed for about 5 years, I then did my PhD and I was in academia. And as a professor, you really don't have much room to negotiate. There's a salary scale. And depending on the number of years experience and the number of extra credits you have of continuing education, it's like, well, that's what the table says. So here's what you earn. There's a little bit to tweak here and there, perhaps with little side benefits. And we'll talk about non-monetary things to negotiate when you're doing salary negotiations and stuff a little later on today, right? So, but when I shifted after coming out of academia, which especially in the social sciences is not known for being well-funded or having particularly lucrative salaries, and then shifting gears into the corporate consulting world, which I never would have anticipated. What I was originally trying to ask for money-wise, I finally hired a coach who was terrific and I've had a number of business development coaches over the years, but after she had a 20-something year career history in HR and human resources originally. And when we were talking about what I was trying to build, I said, what does the average, corporate training kind of cost? And she gave me the number and my jaw hit the floor because I kind of had to add another zero to the end, which was a happy surprise nevertheless. But my challenge became, on the one hand, you don't imagine that anybody else would pay more than you can afford to pay. And I forgot, like I was not my own clientele. I was looking to do coaching for corporate leadership, executives, et cetera. And they have a very different budget than I, as someone who'd spent way too long in the academic space, had at my disposal to spend. So we have to get out of our own head. And what often people will say is you can't envision making any more than 10% about or asking for or raising your rates any more than 10% beyond what the current set is. We can't see, and we can't even envision long-term making more than double what we currently have, or it may be 50%. I forget what the actual stat is, but there's all that, where are you coming from? And the irony is that when I first started my shift out of education and into business, I was originally looking for the tenure track faculty jobs of sorts, as opposed to the part-time while a student. And the salaries were so bad. That was part of my motivation to shift gears. And I don't mean just like, okay, yeah, it's terrible, but I mean not livable in some of the areas that I was looking for. And I didn't have a really high bar. It wasn't like I was Lamborghinis in my own jet kind of a thing. But my mantra after a while became, I was never motivated by money until you told me I couldn't have any.
And I almost had the opposite experience of you.
How's that?
Because I had the multi-six-figure career,
right,
and I couldn't envisage how I could possibly earn, more money than this doing something else. And so I had the opposite.
It's terrifying when you're going from a salary to an entrepreneurial situation where you only eat what you kill. So you have to be constantly drumming up, doing the sales and doing that kind of development work as well. But I love the questions that are in the chat. So I want to read a couple of them out loud, or a couple of the mindsets and the family values that people shared. Things like, we were raised raised to work hard and also care for family and for those in need. Things like, be frugal, Don't spend it until you make it. I got that one too. My father was, when I was a freshman in college, bought me my first American, not bought, but got me a first American Express card. And he handed it to me and he was staring straight in my face. And he's like, you will pay off the full balance every month. You will not pay interest. Do you understand? I was like, yes, Dad. Okay. And thank God. I mean, what a phenomenal early lesson in money,
Yes.
right? Other people said in health was always number one in priority, but money was not discussed. Another
Yes.
one, work hard for money, but be private about it. That whole type of like, we don't talk about money. That's so important. And then, so who do we learn from if all of our role models were modeling?
That absolutely is one of the key problems for all of us, is that it's not talked about, and it's not, and the psychology and emotions aren't talked about, and the role of how we feel about ourselves and our relationship to money isn't talked about. So yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, because but it's such a common experience. I think it's, pretty much universal experience. So yeah, so maybe we should talk a little bit about what holds us back.
I would agree. I would agree. And I think so much of it is based on this fear of rejection, right? No one wants to hear no. That's an uncomfortable place to be. We don't like putting other people in the position of having to say no. And that hearing that no is so inherently tied, whether or not it should be, to our feelings of self-worth. So tell me about what your perspective has been on this.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we tend to think, I'm not good enough. I'm not perfect. It's not good enough yet. Perfect, of course, doesn't exist. And it takes, more courage than I've got to go and put myself on the line and then risk finding out that I'm not good enough. And so we get stuck and we actually don't do that. The other thing I think we can do is we hint, but to avoid the rejection, we're not direct. And it's like, just as we talked about any relationship, once you get clear communication and you start, everybody understands, where your boss understands where you are, you understand where your boss is, then you know what to work with. But until you have that clarity of conversation, you run the risk of making assumptions. And a story that I heard recently, which I thought was excellent on this front, is a particular employee. She wanted a raise, and so she wrote a proposal for her boss, and she included what she had been doing, what she'd been contributing, where she'd gone above and beyond, and she laid it out. And she sent it in an email, and she said, for your review, or something similar to that. And so a few days went by, and she heard nothing. And a few more days went by and she went nothing. And she was talking to her friends. She was like, oh my goodness, I think he wants to get rid of me. He hasn't said anything. And he's probably wondering what to say to me, or he just doesn't know what to say to me, but it's not good, because if it was good, he would have already spoken with me. Finally, she actually addressed it. And she said, I wonder if you've had an opportunity to have a look at the proposal that I sent the other day. And her boss said, oh, no, I'm really sorry. I haven't had an opportunity to get to it yet. Is it urgent? And in that moment, she realized that she hadn't been direct and straightforward enough, and that she could have pointed him towards her urgency appropriately, towards him reading it. And as immediately he found out how important it was for her, he said, oh, I will read it immediately. And they then sat down and had a conversation, and actually she got her raise. And so, there are some other key things here that come into this whole thing of feeling worthy, is when you don't address that, because you're carrying these emotions, you're not going in and having a conversation. You don't find out whether there's a perception about you that's actually getting in the way. And without that understanding and knowledge, you can't come up with a strategy and a plan to actually dismantle that perception and replace it with the reality. So, yeah, no one knows what we're doing. None of us know what somebody else is doing in their role. We think we know, obviously, and a conversation can be enlightening. But none of us know what our boss really has on his or her plate. Nobody else, knows exactly what we have on our plate. So we have to learn to communicate.
And that's why we're here, is to work on that communication. Exactly. So what is a way that, how can people start to reframe this notion about asking for money so that we, those internal gremlins that we have, that little inner critic, that little unpleasant voice on whichever shoulder he or she likes to reside, um, so that that voice doesn't say you're greedy, or the who do you think you are, or there's no way they're going to say yes to this, that you're being selfish, or you're being, whatever else it happens to be. How do we reframe it in our minds so that we can feel more confident and comfortable making the ask, but still respect ourselves in the process?
Absolutely. I think the very first question to ask yourself is, who are you not to ask for that raise?
Interesting. So, okay, so it's not about, well, who am I to ask for this much money? It's who am I not to ask for that? Tell me more. Why?
Because so first of all, one of the things I recommend, when you update your CV, you're always, once you're reminded of all of the things that you've achieved, all of the things that you've done, you start to, I think for all of us, we get a boost in the way we feel and our confidence level, everything that we've achieved. I would recommend that you actually consider that type of exercise before, if you're having doubts about going in and asking for the raise, go and do that exercise. But go and have a look at what were your goals, what were the objectives for this year. Go and assess yourself against those goals, because you're not going in to ask for a raise if you feel as though you haven't achieved them. You've probably achieved them, and you've probably gone above and beyond. So get super clear in your head about those things. That will boost your confidence. It will also enable you to be ready for a clear and confident conversation about that with the right people. So reframe it inside your head, in terms of, first of all, owning the value that you bring to your organization or to your clients. If you don't own it, they can't own it. So it starts with you. And that's an empowering place to be, because when it starts with you, you can work on you.
I think that looking at that, and I understand that there are at least two different major buckets of people who are joining us today. There are those who are the consultants, business owners, et cetera. And there are those who are the employees and who would be talking more about the raise as opposed to the asking for the contracts, et cetera. So to some of our stories and some of our examples may borrow language that would be more likely to be experienced in one side or the other. But think about how you would frame it if it's not from your world, what it would look like there. Or frankly, put it in the chat. Okay, what would that sound like? We could say XYZ in asking for the raise, but what about when asking for our rate? It's a different.
And that's a great question, because I think what happens in the mind of particularly beginning entrepreneurs is they start thinking about, what's the exchange of money for time? And that's the biggest pitfall that you can fall into, because it's not about that. It's about the value. We also tend to think in a very limited way about the value. We think about the direct value. Often when I'm working with clients, with entrepreneurs, I have them think about, what about, particularly for instance, as a coach, working with a coach, who else is impacted if the person you work with starts to earn more money, starts to be successful in whatever their endeavor is? Who else is impacted by that? What about their personal, their feeling of confidence, their ability to actually play bigger, actually go for bigger clients?
Yes.
All of those things can transform not only the life of the person, but also their relationship, their family situation. There are so many people impacted. And there's a mushroom effect. When you're a coach, or when you are an entrepreneur, depending on what you're doing, but you're offering a service to somebody, you're enhancing the lives of others. And that is a very big thing to do.
I think being able to operationalize that ripple effect is really important. We talk, when you're selling a product or service, we talk about the value proposition. If you're pitching your business, you're pitching whatever it is, what is the value prop of the product or service that you're offering? So, and even if you think in those terms, as far as your role in a company, not just what it's not just about what tasks do you complete, not what's on your to-do list. That's not the value. Why do you do them? How does it make everybody else different? So just by way of example, I was working with a client who we were working with her on her elevator pitch. And because she worked for a Fortune 100 company and she was kind of the head of architecture, IT architecture, something or other, had a huge, her title was actually like longer than would fit on a business card, which kind of made it hard then. And she said, I need to know, not just for a networking event, but if I'm in the elevator one day and the CEO walks in and looks at me and says, "What do you do for me? Why do I pay you?" Like, what do I say that they're going to understand? And what started out is this list of, well, I manage this and I'm developing that and we're working on putting together all these. And what we came down to,
And the reason why you're doing all of that?
Well, yes. And what that came to, what we boiled the whole thing down to simply was, if the CEO walks in and says, "Why do I pay you? What do you do for me?" Her line became, "My job is to make sure that no matter where you are in the world, when you log in, everything just works."
Awesome. Yes.
That's it. And if he wants to know more about this, that, or the other thing, great, you can continue that conversation. But it's crystal clear the value to the listener that you provide, because we all are painfully familiar with when we go to try to log in and stuff isn't loading, or it's not booting, or it's not this, or it's just not connecting. And you just want to pull your hair out because you just need it to work. It's like health. A couple people have mentioned health in the chat. We take our health for granted until suddenly we don't feel well, and then we can't focus on anything else. So what is the value that you provide? Stop thinking about the features of the thing that you sell, or about the features of your job, the tasks that you do, the meetings that you attend, and think about why. Who do you affect? If I'm going to coach you to get better at this particular skill set, your executive presence, your leadership communication, being able to speak in these different contexts, et cetera, why is your company going to pay for this? Why do they care? They need you. We know what they pay you, but they need you to be better at this. Why? What's in it for them if you get better at this? That's why I need to do, because it's not about just your salary or your job. They envision the ripple effect. So let's talk about that.
Yes, I think that value is absolutely where it's at. I think that the other side of this is understanding the perception. If the perception is you have value where you are now, but perhaps you're not seen as potentially being able to provide value where you want to go.
Yes.
And I think that this is, for instance, I was recently, I actually was interviewing somebody, and they gave me this example, which was, I thought, perfect. So there was a female scientist in pharma, actually, wanting to get into a strategic role, but she wasn't seen as strategic. And so no matter how hard she tried, she was not able to convince anybody to take her on. And so the strategy that she employed, and this is something I would encourage all of you to think about in terms of how could this fit for you, she started taking speaking engagements where she started actually using the word strategy. She also referred, the way she talked about what she did was in a strategic way, and she called attention to the fact that it was strategic. And then she called attention to the fact that she was being asked to speak outside her organization on strategic issues. And so there was good visibility within the organization. And within about 3 months, that shifted the perception of her as a strategic person, and that positioned her to be able to go for the next step up in her career and become a vice president and actually step into everything that she was capable of.
And that's so important to think about. What role are you aspiring to? And what's the difference, not just in the responsibilities, but in the kinds of things you need to discuss, who you need to engage with, the vocabulary they use, the topics that are most interesting to them, most urgent to them, even things like how do they dress? Yes. Whether it's virtual or in person. As they say, you have to dress the part and you have to speak the part as well. You have to sound like them. And that was something that I had encountered with a client as well at one of the larger tech companies who had been aspiring to this executive role for a while, but kept getting passed over. And what we realized in part was that every time she had to do a presentation to that executive team, that she was being way too tactical. was presenting as if she was presenting it to her own team or to her peers. But when we reframed it and talked more about the bottom line relevance and about, the strategy involved, that changed everything. And she really stepped back and she says, I never realized that I was approaching it one way versus the other. I never drew a distinction between the two. And, within 6 months, she got the promotion after X number of years of never quite being viewed as executive material.
Yes.
You have to talk the talk. And it's not just about the numbers. You demonstrate that, and then the numbers come more easily from there.
Yes. And I think beyond a certain point, it's also important to think about the fact that it's political. And politics often has, perhaps not when you use that particular word, but if you think about it in terms of networking, this is about being visible and people knowing who you are and people actually understanding the value that you bring and then starting to advocate for you, sponsoring you when you're not there in the room. Making sure that, because up into a certain level, sort of a mid-level, it's not as critical, but the more you aspire to actually stepping into all of that you're capable of, the more this is an important part of the strategy that you need to embrace in order to achieve that level that you're absolutely worthy of.
And what can you suggest as far as what kind of reconnaissance work people can do in advance? How do you identify what's possible, where there's flexibility in certain things? What are some resources that people can use, or directions that people can take to the Japanese has an expression called nemawashi, which means to dig around the root. And it's the idea, it's not beating around the bush. That's a different issue in English, but the digging around the root means as opposed to just trying to lift and pull, yank the plant out, you have to do the prep work all around the issue first, and then the plant itself will come out, roots and all. So if you're looking to do a little bit of your nemawashi, a little bit of your digging around the root before you go in to actually pull the trigger and yank, asking for that money, what kind of digging can people do and how?
I think directly preparing for that conversation, first of all, you need to set it up in the right way. You need to be respectful of your boss's time, whoever you're talking to. So you need to actually indicate to them clearly that you'd like to have a conversation, when's convenient for them. This is immediately prior to, obviously, the conversation. And be prepared, as I said before, do your own preparation. Where have you gone above and beyond? Where have you contributed, huge value to the organization? Who else is aware of that can actually speak for you, that can actually speak about
advocate? Sure, testimonials.
I think if you are at the beginning of that networking, maybe you haven't tended that as much as you could. Start with the people who you're drawn to. Are there people in the organization that you feel a kindred spirit with? Are there opportunities to be on the same committee, to actually volunteer for something, to actually interact with and develop relationships that are not necessarily simply about business, but they can lead to that person getting to know you, getting to an awareness of what you do as a whole person. Those relationships, because it's about
yes,
the relationships that you build. And those relationships are not just transactional. They're between people.
Right. And that's an important point to do a little detour for a second on, because I'm hearing more and more concerns nowadays from Context Connections colleagues in HR. And as we become more distributed, more hybrid, more virtual, more, call it whatever term du jour that you prefer, yes, for a lot of people, they're more comfortable. It's more convenient. They may even feel more productive. But when all you're communicating, your only connection with other coworkers, especially those higher up, is through whatever the text chat messenger feature is in your computer system, or emails, or the occasional Zoom, you don't develop the depth of relationship with those people. And whether or not you have the chance to go to lunch and chit chat and small talk in the halls, those things do add up. But when it comes time, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, when you want that promotion, it's not just going to be about your relationship. It's going to be, you want to lead people Well, how do you get along with people? How do you work with people? How do you connect with people? Do they trust you? Do they like you? Do they confide in you? Do they perform for you? Will they step up for you? And you need to, when we're working from home and not actually seeing anybody except through this, we can't overlook the fact that we need to take proactive measures to reach out actively and start to build or at least maintain these relationships with people who we already had relationships with or who we want relationships with. Because if it's going to come down to who is my competition for this job, is it going to be, I've been a great workhorse. I kept my nose to the grindstone. I've always turned in my assignments on time. Great. That shows that you're a good employee. Not that you're good at creating team cohesion, at developing relationships, at having people trust you, the leadership component of it, right? So the person, ceteris paribus, if you and somebody else are both good tacticians, good workers, good team members, that's great. But the one who has the reputation of people know you, they trust you, they get you, they understand you as a person, that's the person who's going to have the leg up and who will be able to command a much higher salary along with it. So don't overlook that and wait 2 years down the line from now until you want the job to start to build those relationships. And I know there are people out there who are going, oh, but I liked working from home. I didn't have to see anybody ever. I didn't have to.
It means that you don't have to totally give that up, but it means be strategic about the time that you spend. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to send off my cat here. He seems to love every time I speak on to my computer.
It's me. Cats and dogs are always like, oh, Laura's there. Laura, Laura, I want to say hi. So it's, hi, kitty.
And I think one of the things that I was really not good at in my corporate career, but I would also recommend, is have a vision for your future, because it speaks to what Laura was saying earlier about if you are operating in the role as you would in the role you're in now, you're not signaling to anybody that you're ready for that next level. So you need to think yourself into that next level. What does that require? What does that level? What's the vision for that? What is your vision for where you're somebody in that, where you would take the team, where you would take the project, where you would, what would you do if you were in that next level up? Once you think yourself into that space and start operating from that space, you make it much easier for somebody else to see you as that potential leader. And to promote you. I think something else, and this is just a small point that just adds on to what we said earlier. And that's something else you can do. And this benefits you, and it also benefits those that you're talking to about, I'm ready for this next step. At the end of every week, take 15 minutes. Write down your achievements for the week. Write down where you've gone above and beyond, where you brought value. And because that reminds you, you can always send it to your boss too, because your boss doesn't know what you're doing. And usually when things are going well, nobody's looking very deeply at what you're doing. And so it's an opportunity to just very briefly allow them to see. When they see, when you have that relationship, when you have that vision for the way you want to go and you're communicating for that, now you you're out of your own head. You're out, and being in your head is when you're about, is it perfect? Is it worthy? Get out of your head and get into this future and get into what's possible. That's the path.
It's a great way to create your own little log. I mean, many of us have our to-do list. I forget who it was who said it, they like to take their to-do list and at the end of the day, turn it into a ta-da list. So what I'm going to do versus ta-da, it's done. So when you look through that ta-da list, pick 3 things where you feel like you added real value, what was to the set project or aside, etc. And if you were just at the end of the day to take 30 seconds before you leave and open a note app on your phone and just every day keep a log, 3 things that you did to add value. I bet over time you'll notice patterns and you realize I'm someone who does X. I'm someone who adds Y. And this is something that you didn't think about paying me for, but frankly, you should. And here's why. If you can, to the extent that you can directly or indirectly monetize the value that creates, team cohesion or even things that, I mean, nobody wants turnover. And in this great, call it what you will, resignation, exploration, blah, 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 that companies are dying to keep staff in place. And if you're good glue for them, then that's a real asset. It's not something to overlook. So it can be real simple, but you don't want to wait until the time that you're going to now apply for the job and try to think about, okay, what have I done?
Lay the groundwork. Absolutely.
Yep.
That's fine.
One bite at a time.
And I think really the sum of what we've both said here is this is how you get out of your own head. It's how you get out of your fear and into your aspiration, into what's possible.
Yes.
And that's the place you need to get to.
Absolutely. And I think where culture and personality and conflict orientation and whatnot also come into it, there's a term that you've used, or an issue you've touched on a couple of times today, the notion of being respectful and but still assertive and whatever else. That's something that can be really challenging for people, especially if you've been raised or otherwise just are genetically inclined to feel like I have to be humble. I can't be too aggressive. And this is something that often tends to be more challenging for women because there's a finer line between being assertive and being the bitch and being whatever else it is. There's a little more, men have a little bit more leeway of where they can run on that field. But I think it's important to recognize, and also who's your boss, what's their thought, but what is the definition of humility without being apologetic or self-effacing, right? How can you find that balance? And you need to, your industry, your peers, coworkers, bosses, your what's appropriate for the culture that you're working within, or you try to figure it out one way or another. If you're applying for a job in a different organization, but recognizing where for some people, they want aggressive, they want, no, just throw it against the wall and see if it sticks and be super enthusiastic. And, here's what I'm looking for. And here's what I'm going to bring to the table. And it's a hard sell. And somebody across the table might look and go, good, I like the energy. That works. Sure. And somebody else may be like, well, aren't we full of ourselves?
And there's a whole thing that, I remember as a brand new sales rep, learning this whole thing about it. We talk about mirroring, but it is that appropriate mirroring for the style of the person that you're dealing with. It goes for what you're wearing and all of that for success.
Yes. Some people will refer to it as matching and mirroring, and you actually took the first word right out of my mouth. That when in doubt, and this is not acting, this is not inauthenticity,
Not at all.
This is not faking it, this is not pretending, covering, any of that stuff. But read the room. Just think about it that way.
And as you build that confidence muscle by reminding yourself of what you bring, because we if you don't build it, if you don't focus on it, you can lose sight of it. But as you build it, you don't have to become somebody that you're not. But you also need to think about, you're not going in there to apologize for the fact that you've earned the right to ask for a raise.
Right.
And so being firm, being confident, using language, try it out. If you're somebody that tends to find, well, I'm sorry, or apologizing.
Oh, yes. Please take the word sorry out of your vocabulary.
Before you do it, practice. In fact, write it out, because that will allow you to take out all of those words.
Not to memorize a script, but do recognize where your tendencies are, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, whatever works for you, so that you can see it.
Yes.
You can see it clearly. And then you can choose you're going to do this differently.
Yes. And I would really encourage people to think about, get the matching and mirroring part in your head, because this is something that many people tend to overlook. I know that I have to keep myself in check. Sometimes I'm obviously a very high energy person, but when I'm trying to pitch a new client or a prospect, I do want to see, are they people who are kind of reserved, and are they thinking about, where to go with this, and okay, it's out of my comfort zone, or, they're a little more subdued, and I can watch from the body language, they're kind of holding back a little bit. Then I'm not going to be in your face and super high energy and super, because they're just going to want me to go to decaf. That's not going to be a comfort point. So I need to take it down a notch. I don't mean, okay, so you want to talk about coaching? Okay. Like, it's not suck the life out of the conversation, right? But it's just recognizing, okay, how will that person feel more comfortable? I have those subdued parts of me as well. I don't have to always be hyper caffeinated when I'm talking to somebody. You want to match what you feel what part of you, dig deep and find what part of you can connect better with how that person seems to be feeling in that moment. And it's part of what I call your prismatic voice. So the same
Yeah.
way that when you've seen those little crystals hanging from a window and the sun hits it and the little rainbow lands on the floor or the wall or wherever it projects, similarly, we are that white light. And in us are all those different colors. And so that high energy part, you may call that your yellow, and the more subdued part of you, you may call your blue. I have a 6-year-old. I don't talk to him like this. This won't work. This is my coach, my trainer, my podcast host, kind of presenter energy. And you don't want to see my mommy voice. I mean, you might. It might be momentarily entertaining, but it will not be helpful in setting my the credibility markers.
I think there's something important to be said here, though, because I absolutely agree with you. Totally. The way we show up when we're being interviewed and the way we show up when we're asking for a raise is obviously totally different from that at home or you're dealing with your cat. However, I think it's important to know if you are an introvert and you are dealing with a highly extrovert boss, you don't have to become extrovert in that conversation. In fact, when you energetically show up confidently because you've prepared for this, this is a conversation that you are ready to have, you can actually help an extrovert bring their energy down a little and actually focus on you by being very present. And present is the word here. So you don't have to become somebody you're not.
Right.
But you do have to get into your sense of confidence and power and operate from there.
Yes.
And doing that will enable the right sentences to come out. It will enable you to negotiate. It will enable you to ask for more time if something comes up that you need to think about. It will allow you to stand up for yourself and in an appropriate way. So I think both sides of this are really important to take on board.
Yes. Yeah, of course. And I want to be careful even with words like introvert and extrovert because people can overgeneralize and they're not binary options. Number one, it's a spectrum. And it's not also just about how much volume.
Honestly, Laura, I just remember because I was in sales and marketing. So we were largely quite gregarious, and I had one or two bosses who were extremely gregarious. But I also worked in development because for a lot of my global career, I was working with development scientists in early development and sort of phase 2-3 trials.
Sure.
And some of the scientists that I worked with were very much not. They were very different personality, and so I just want to, honor both of those. You don't have to become someone you're not.
Right. Absolutely. But to the extent that someone is of a quieter type, we'll take away the labels. But if you feel like you're more of a reserved personality and you do want to find we'll call it your intensity, your presence, as you mentioned, do you seem like you want to be there? Do you at least smile? If you're talking with someone who's very happy to meet you and has lots of smiles and you never crack a smile.
I once had a colleague say to me, "Do you know how serious you look?" And I had no idea. I think he thought I was thinking something detrimental, possibly even about him. And I wasn't at all. I was just lost in my own thoughts.
Yes. Exactly. So, if you feel like that person's showing positive energy towards you, dig and find that. And it can be hard sometimes because during an interview, for example, or a negotiation of sorts, you're nervous. There's a lot at stake. This is an important conversation. You don't want to mess things up. So all of those thoughts in the back of your head can have you with this really super tense, stiff, unrelatable energy coming in. And that may not be you. And maybe it is. I don't know. But one way or another, make sure that it doesn't own you.
And if you need to take notes in with you, take them in with you.
Yes.
If that makes you feel like I'm going to retain control here, absolutely. That's your preparation. It's so worth doing and having the right questions. You don't want to be like, when you go to the doctor and you come out and you think, I didn't tell him so-and-so. That's not where you want to be.
Yes, yes. There is nothing wrong. And I want to reiterate that suggestion that Sue just made, that bring notes, do your homework, come prepared with your reasons of this and examples of that, and be ready at that point to reference them. I mean, you don't want to write your script and be reading off the page while you don't want to sound like the fifth grader reading their "What I Did on My Summer Vacation" essay. But there's nothing wrong with having your evidence there for you to jog your own memory, or if they ask for certain things, to look and find it. There's nothing wrong with being able to look them in the eye. And even if they comment, "So what kind of notes you got there?" Just to say something like, "Well, I always like to be prepared.
I want to think about this. And so I made a few notes before I came
Yes.
in.
I mean,
Absolutely.
really, who would you prefer?" And you can then take notes as that person's talking. You can jot down things that they said that you want to remember, or responses that you want to be able to share, but without interrupting that person. Take those notes. I cannot think of one person on the planet who would prefer that you not take notes and just wing it and blather and ramble and try to think aloud and figure out your own point as you're talking in a horribly inefficient mess of word soup. No.
Your responsibility to yourself is to put your best foot forward and to make sure you've made the case. And Nina, I
was just noticing that. Yes.
Absolutely. Reframing this process as it's not you're just going to go and ask for a raise. You're going to strategically prepare for this and do a great job. And really, and think about it this way also, you're doing the right thing for yourself. You're really making sure that you showcase all of the value that you bring. You're also doing the right thing for the organization. It's not good for the organization to underestimate what you can do and what you're capable of and what you're actually achieving right now, because the ultimate result will be that you will go somewhere else. And probably neither of you wants that. So
right.
Having to start again.
Exactly. And, I like how she said too, it's not about asking for the raise per se. It's about explaining or justifying or providing evidence as to why the raise is appropriate.
Yeah.
100%.
Help somebody, you're helping your boss support you, become your supporter. So
yes.
Totally.
Yes, exactly. And if, for that matter, give them, especially if they're not the final decision maker, if they have to bring it up to committee or to somebody else, give them those talking points, help them. I mean, whether it's literally giving it to them on paper or whatnot, doesn't really matter, but at least share with them what I like to call tweetable and repeatable sound bites, simple examples, because of X, because of Y, because of Z. They go, hey, okay, yeah, that makes it easy to remember. I can pass that along. So keep it short and sweet.
Yes, totally. And I think that brings us really nicely to what happens in that negotiation if the money isn't available. And so this is, we all know that, within corporations, within your team, there'll be an allowance for the salary. And so the answer may be that, if they give, it may not be said to you this directly, but if they give you this raise, then somebody else is going to have to lose out. And that's always a challenging situation. So think about ahead of time, as you would with any negotiation, think about what is valuable to you that actually you would come out and feel that I really feel rewarded and I feel recognized and I have got something out of this negotiation that is really of value to me. And the types of things are, do you want some more vacation? Do you want to do some study? Do you want the corporation to actually support you in, an area of study that would actually enhance your value?
As in subsidizing, as in paying.
As in subsidizing and paying, absolutely.
Not just like, rah, okay, we support you. Go.
No.
Have fun, study.
Absolutely subsidizing it.
Sure. And by the way, a lot of this is referred to as expanding the pie.
A more attractive employee. And that money comes out of a different part of the budget. So,
Yes.
I mean, thinking about a special project that you could work on, and again, this is about strategic, about where do you want to go? What's your next step in your career? Who do you need to get in front of? Can you go and work on a special project in a different team to get exposure within a team, which would be a great team to move into? Are there do you want flex time? We talked about flex time,
yes, sure.
And so think about the things that are valuable to you and think about what you would ideally like to have. And then think about, what would be the minimum that I would come out and feel as though this went well?
Right. Right. So you've got your need to have and your nice to have. You've
Absolutely.
brainstormed. And when you're brainstorming as part of that preparation, I think it's important to, a brainstorm, if you go back to your sixth grade essay writing classes and whatnot, brainstorms during that process, you don't edit, just data dump. Any
Yes.
idea, put on the paper, and you can reprioritize later. You can cross them off if you think, nah, I don't actually want that one, but don't over edit in the beginning, because the more ideas you have, the more flexibility you have to be able to find creative solutions and alternatives. It's referred to often as expanding the pie. It's not just about, well, how much money is there? How much of it are you going to get? How much of it am I going to get? What else can we talk about? So is it about having extra paid time off, personal time?
Yep.
Is it about conference attendance? And
that's a great one.
with registration, travel, etc. Is it, you mentioned the training opportunities, how much time would be spent on site, working from home, somewhere else?
And also don't forget the value to your boss and employer of you doing that.
Yes.
What that means, for instance, flex time actually gives you, it may give you an extra hour of work a day. I mean, you may not want to do that, but
Yes.
think about that, because it's not all benefit for you. It's usually those things have a benefit for both. Send me to a conference. I'm going to come back. I'll share with the team what I learned.
Yes.
Yes. Go and work on another team. I'm going to take, the expertise from this project I'm working on over there, or I'm going to bring it back to our team.
Yes.
There are always two sides to that. And so don't forget that when you are asking for this.
Right.
When you present it in that way, you make it so much easier for somebody to say yes.
It's that very Jerry Maguire, help me help you.
Yes, totally.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and you can even talk about things like transportation allowances, whether it's on public transit or gas money, or is there a company car option? Is there, something along those lines? I had a client who had been in a company for a while and was ready to try something new in her career overall. And she was offered a new job. She was very excited about it, new professional opportunity and a better package. And when she went back and told her boss that she was leaving, that they countered with a much higher salary than she ever expected. She would never have thought that to even ask for that much money. And she said, it's really not about the money. I mean, I really want that other job, but I can't afford to turn down the money on the new place. I said, well, okay, so go back and reopen it. And she's like, but I can't do that. I already said yes. I already accepted the first job. I said, I understand that. And what she said was, but how can I demand more money when I said, no.
But the situation
I never said demand.
Now.
Right.
There are
Exactly.
dynamics that were not there when this
Exactly.
discussion.
So you are presenting new information. Did you orally agree to accept? Yes, but it's not like you already moved. You didn't already cash a signing bonus check. There's nothing, this is 24 hours. The world has not shifted in those 24 hours.
That's
Nothing really has changed. I doubt they've even told their
You're
other
also
people
giving them the opportunity if they really want you to. You're not giving them that opportunity if you don't go back.
Right, exactly. And so we came up with our need to have and our nice to have and all sorts of things. Even things like, okay, it was going to be a primarily work from home job, whereas her other job was on site. So things like office furniture. Do you have a decent desk? Do you have an ergonomic chair?
Yes.
Do you want a standing desk? Do you want, I mean, a window they can't probably get for you if you're going to work from home now. Either you have a window in your house or you don't. But nevertheless,
in your house.
so what else can you ask for them? Is it, what kind of equipment do you need, et cetera? Do you need a new headset, a new microphone for your home Zoom from home workstation? And so she went and she negotiated and she came back. And the next time we met, she was practically exploding off the screen with her energy. She said, I can't believe it. I told them what it was. They gave me everything, but everything on the list, even the chair. I said, okay.
And I would say as a final thought, it is this. All of that starts and ends with you. It starts and ends with you doing the work to really own your own value. And the more you do that, and the more you own it, feel confident, and get into that place of self-belief through doing the work to see that, yes, wow, I really do make a major contribution here. I really am bringing value.
Yep.
You give the opportunity to let the people around you your boss, other companies, whoever you're talking about, your clients, you allow them to see that value, and then they'll pay you.
Yes. Yes. And my last piece that I'm going to add in there is a very small tactic for putting the ball in their court. Make your offer, make your request,
Yes.
and stop talking. Most people's discomfort with asking for
100%.
money is they say what they want and then they sort of hedge and but I mean I just can't, and if you can't, I mean I understand that maybe it's a lot and you keep renegotiating around yourself and they're going
and they watch you talk yourself down.
Yes.
Yes.
Make your statement and stop talking. Let them break the silence.
Yes.
It is one of the hardest things to do.
Even if it feels like the longest silence in history.
Right. And it's probably not, because they don't want it to last long either. So they're going to break it quickly, but make them break it.
And it's the same when you are offering your service to somebody. State your price.
Yes.
You've had the conversation. You've talked all through what's needed, what you do addresses what they need, the value that you bring. Say your price and then stop.
Yes.
They may be thinking about where they could get the money from.
Right.
You have no idea what's going on in their heads.
Exactly.
And we built the stories. So we're making up stories about, oh my goodness, they're thinking that they're going to give this to us, or they can't afford it or whatever. We have no idea.
Right.
So just wait.
Yes. And so with that note, we will take our own advice and we will stop talking, but not before we invite all of you to connect with us. Sue, how can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me. Well, first of all, I'd quickly love to tell you about the fact that I am running an event. It's a free online event right now, exactly about this topic. It's called Millionaire Mindset: Breakthrough Strategies for Professional People. And I interviewed 12 experts, people who are really deeply into this, who built their careers on this topic. It's not what you get from your accountant. It's not what you get from your financial advisor. It's about the psychology and emotions of money.
So where can people log on? Because I know people are going to.
I'm going to give you the bit.ly link right now, and we will post this as well.
Yes.
So bit.ly, so bit.ly/22 millionaire mindset.
The number 22.
The number 22.
Got it.
Yeah.
22 millionaire mindset. Excellent.
And
so
that
would
be fabulous. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, Laura. I really enjoyed it.
It's been so great having you, Sue. Thank you to everybody for logging in, joining us in the conversation. Please share the link with your friends and, of course, connect with us as well on LinkedIn one way or another, and let us know that you heard us here. Have a great day, everybody, and go ask for the money that you deserve. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.